Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed his cleaning cart down another endless hallway of the Imperial Palace. The massive structure floated in space like a golden jewel, its walls made of some crystal material that seemed to glow with its own light. 3 alien suns cast rainbow colors through the transparent sections, creating patterns that would have been beautiful if Marcus wasn't so tired. He'd been working here for 8 months now, ever since he signed that contract back on Earth. The Terran labor exchange had made it sound like a great opportunity: work for the mighty Dragon Empire, see the galaxy, send good money back home to his sick mother in Cleveland. What they didn't mention was how lonely it would be, or how the dragon people treated humans like walking furniture. The dragons were impressive, no doubt about that. Some stood 12 feet tall with scales that shifted color based on their mood. Others were smaller but moved with a grace that made them seem like they were dancing through air. All of them had those piercing eyes that seemed to look right through you, like you weren't even worth noticing. Marcus stopped his cart outside a massive door carved with intricate dragon symbols. This was the tower section where the royal family lived. He wasn't supposed to be up here. Human cleaners usually handled the lower levels, but someone had called in sick and Marcus needed the overtime pay. As he began mopping the crystal floors, he heard something that made him pause. It was a sound he recognized from his childhood, the labored breathing of someone who was really sick. It reminded him of his little cousin during those bad asthma attacks, when the whole family would gather around, not knowing what to do. Through a crack in one of the doors, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement. Curiosity getting the better of him, he stepped closer and peered inside. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. Expensive furniture was scattered around, chairs that looked like they were made from single pieces of carved stone, tables that seemed to float without any support. But what caught Marcus's attention was the figure lying on a raised platform in the center. It was a young dragon, but unlike any Marcus had seen before. Where the other dragons had bright, colorful scales, this one's were a dull gray, almost colorless. He was small too, probably no bigger than a human teenager, and thin in a way that spoke of long illness. His breathing came in short, difficult gasps, and occasionally he would shiver despite the warm air. This had to be Prince Talon, the Emperor's youngest son. Marcus had heard the whispers from other human workers, how the prince was dying of some disease the dragons couldn't cure, how even his own family had given up on him. The dragon nobles called it void sickness and spoke about it like it was some kind of curse. As Marcus watched, the prince tried to sit up, struggled for a moment, then fell back onto his sleeping platform with a sound of frustration that was heartbreakingly human in its emotion. The young dragon's golden eyes, the only part of him that still seemed alive, stared at the ceiling with an expression of such loneliness that Marcus felt his chest tighten. Nobody visited him. In all the months Marcus had worked here, he'd never seen anyone go in or out of that room except for the occasional servant dropping off food. No family members, no friends, no doctors checking on him. The prince was dying alone, forgotten by everyone who should have cared about him. Marcus thought about his own family back on Earth. When his little brother had gotten sick with pneumonia, the whole neighborhood had shown up. Mrs. Johnson from next door brought soup every day. The kids from school made get-well cards. Even when money was tight and the medical bills were piling up, nobody talked about giving up. That's just what you did for family, for people you cared about. But here was a prince, someone who should have had the best of everything, wasting away by himself like a forgotten pet. The mighty Dragon Empire, with all its advanced technology and centuries of civilization, had simply decided that one of their own wasn't worth the effort. As Marcus continued his work, moving from room to room in the royal wing, he kept thinking about those golden eyes and that labored breathing. Something about the situation felt wrong in a way that went deeper than just sadness. It felt like a violation of something basic and human, the idea that nobody should have to face death alone. By the time his shift ended, Marcus had made a decision that would change everything. The sound echoed through the tower like thunder, a crash that seemed to shake the entire floating palace. Thompson was 3 floors down when he heard it, but something in his gut told him exactly where it had come from. He dropped his cleaning supplies and ran toward the stairs, his heart already racing. The royal wing was supposed to be off limits during night shift, but Thompson didn't care about rules right now. He took the crystal steps 2 at a time, his work boots slipping on the smooth surface as he climbed higher and higher. The sound had come from Prince Talon's room, he was sure of it. When he reached the massive door, Thompson didn't hesitate. He pushed it open and stepped inside, breaking about a dozen imperial laws in the process. What he saw made his blood run cold. Prince Talon was on the floor beside his sleeping platform, collapsed in a heap like a broken doll. Pieces of what looked like a crystal water vessel were scattered around him. glowing faintly blue before slowly fading to gray. The young dragon's breathing was so shallow that Thompson had to look closely to make sure he was still alive. "Hey, hey," Thompson whispered, dropping to his knees beside the prince. "Can you hear me?" Talon's golden eyes opened slowly, unfocused and filled with pain. He tried to speak but only managed a weak gasp. His scales, already gray from illness, seemed to be getting darker by the second, as if the life was literally draining out of him. Thompson had seen this before, back home when his grandfather had his heart attack. That same look of someone slipping away, fighting to hold on but losing the battle. The difference was, back then there had been paramedics to call, hospitals to rush to, family members gathering around. Here, in this golden palace floating in space, Prince Talon was facing death completely alone. "Please." The word came out barely a whisper from the dragon's throat. His eyes locked onto Thompson's face with desperate hope. Help. Thompson knew the law. Every human worker had been briefed on the first day, never touch a member of the royal family without permission. The punishment was death, no exceptions, no appeals. The Dragon Empire didn't mess around when it came to their social hierarchy. But looking at Prince Talon, really looking at him, Thompson didn't see royalty or alien nobility. He saw a scared young person who was dying, who had whispered the word please, like Thompson was his last hope in the universe. And in that moment all the imperial laws and social rules seemed like meaningless noise. "Okay," Thompson said quietly, reaching out his hands. "I've got you." He slid his arms under Prince Talon as carefully as he could, shocked by how light the dragon felt. It was like picking up a child made of paper and shadows. The prince should have been heavy. Dragons were supposed to be powerful, massive creatures, but illness had wasted him away to almost nothing. Talon didn't resist. Instead, he pressed closer to Thompson's chest, seeking warmth from the human's body heat. His scales felt cold and rough, like touching old leather, but Thompson could feel a faint heartbeat fluttering against his arms. Standing up with the prince in his arms, Thompson turned toward the door and started running. The hallways blurred past as he sprinted toward the medical wing, his legs pumping as fast as they could carry him. Behind him, he could hear shouts echoing through the palace as guards spotted the impossible sight, a human carrying a dragon prince. "Stop right there." The voice boomed with authority, but Thompson didn't slow down. He could explain later, apologize later, face whatever punishment they wanted to give him later. Right now the only thing that mattered was the fading heartbeat against his chest. The medical facility's doors were massive things made of some kind of metal that shimmered like oil on water. Thompson hit them at full speed, using his shoulder to push them open as he burst into the sterile white room beyond. Several dragon physicians looked up in complete shock. Their scales rippled with colors that Thompson had learned meant surprise and anger. One of them, an older dragon with blue and silver scales, started toward him with what looked like the intent to physically remove him from the premises. "Somebody help him," Thompson shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "He collapsed. He's barely breathing. He needs help right now." He didn't care that he was probably about to be arrested, executed, or worse. He didn't care that he'd just broken every rule and violated every protocol. Prince Talon's breathing was getting weaker, and Thompson would be damned if he was going to let this young person die just because of stupid laws about who was allowed to touch whom. For the first time since arriving in the Dragon Empire, Thompson felt completely, purely human. The medical facility fell silent except for the hum of alien machinery and Prince Talon's labored breathing. Thompson stood there holding the dying dragon prince, facing down several of the most advanced physicians in the galaxy. Their scales were shifting through angry colors, deep reds and sharp oranges that meant he was in serious trouble. Dr. Vexter, the chief physician, was the first to speak. His blue scales rippled with indignation as he pointed a clawed finger at Thompson. "Remove this human immediately. How dare you bring your filthy hands into our medical facility? Guards." But before anyone could move, a younger dragon stepped forward. Her scales were silver with hints of green, and unlike the others, she looked more curious than angry. "Wait," she said, studying Thompson with intelligent eyes. "Look at how the human holds the prince. There's genuine care there." Thompson felt Prince Talon's weak grip on his shirt tighten slightly. The young dragon was conscious enough to understand what was happening, and Thompson could see fear flickering in those golden eyes, not fear of dying, but fear of being taken away from the one person who had shown him kindness. "Please," Thompson said, looking directly at Dr. Vexter. "Just look at him. Really look. When's the last time anyone actually examined him instead of just writing him off as hopeless?" Dr. Vexter's scales darkened further. "We are the most advanced medical practitioners in 12-star systems, human. We do not need lessons from a primitive species that barely understands basic chemistry. Then why is he dying? The words came out sharper than Thompson intended, but he was past caring about diplomacy. You've had months, maybe years to treat him. If your advanced medicine is so great, why hasn't it worked? The younger doctor, Thompson noticed her name tag read Dr. Nina, in both Dragon script and Basic Standard, stepped closer. What do you know about the prince's condition, human? Thompson gently shifted Prince Talon in his arms, making him more comfortable. I know what I see. Extreme fatigue, muscle weakness, problems concentrating, depression. Back on Earth, I had a cousin who showed these same symptoms for years before doctors figured out what was wrong with her. Void sickness is not some primitive human ailment, Dr. Vexter snapped. It is a complex degradation of draconic life force that cannot be compared to your species' simple biology. Maybe that's the problem, Thompson said quietly. You're treating a diagnosis instead of a patient. What if void sickness isn't some mystical dragon disease? What if it's just a fancy name for something that has physical causes you haven't looked for? Dr. Nina moved to one of the floating medical displays, her claws dancing over holographic controls. Show me these human symptoms you mentioned. Thompson began describing his cousin Diana's long journey with chronic fatigue syndrome and autoimmune disorders. How doctors on Earth had initially dismissed her as lazy or attention-seeking. How breakthrough treatments came not from high-tech procedures but from understanding the connections between stress, sleep, nutrition, and immune function. The first thing that helped Diana wasn't medication, Thompson explained. It was having people around her who believed she was really sick, who supported her instead of giving up on her. Isolation makes everything worse. As he spoke, Thompson noticed something interesting. Prince Talon's breathing seemed to be getting slightly stronger. Not much, but enough that Thompson could feel the difference. The simple act of being held, of having someone care enough to fight for him, seemed to be giving the young dragon some strength to hold on. Ridiculous, Dr. Vexter muttered, but Dr. Nina was listening intently. What other treatments did your cousin receive? She asked. Thompson explained the basic principles: gradual increases in activity rather than bed rest, managing stress, proper nutrition tailored to the individual's needs, and most importantly, treating the patient as a whole person rather than a collection of symptoms. But the most important thing, Thompson said looking down at Prince Talon, was that nobody gave up on her. Even when she had setbacks, even when progress was slow, her family and friends kept believing she could get better. Hope isn't just emotional, it's medical. People heal better when they have reasons to live. Dr. Nina's scales had shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. These methods, they are not advanced but they are comprehensive. We have focused on the prince's life force energy while ignoring basic biological needs. Because we assumed superior dragon physiology made such considerations irrelevant, Dr. Vexter added grudgingly. Thompson felt Prince Talon stir in his arms. The young dragon's voice was weak but clearer than before. Try it, he whispered. Please. What do I have to lose? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Here was a dying prince, abandoned by his family and written off by the Empire's best doctors, asking for a chance at life using methods from a species they considered primitive. Dr. Nina looked at Dr. Vexter, then back at Thompson. Very well, human. Show us these methods of yours. 3 weeks had passed since that desperate night in the medical wing, and Thompson barely recognized the young dragon lying on the specially adjusted sleeping platform. Prince Talon's scales, once a dull lifeless gray, now showed hints of their natural silver-blue color. His breathing was steady, and for the first time since Thompson had known him, the prince was actually sitting up on his own. Your move, Talon said, studying the chessboard between them with intense concentration. His golden eyes, once dim with illness, now sparkled with curiosity and something Thompson hadn't seen before: hope. Thompson smiled and moved his knight, watching as the prince immediately began calculating his next several moves. Chess had been Keisha's idea. The woman from Detroit worked in the palace kitchens and had started visiting after hearing about the human treatment that was actually working. You know, Keisha said from her chair near the window, back home we used to say that chess teaches you the most important lesson in life: there's always another move to make, even when everything looks impossible. She was working on one of her craft projects, teaching Talon how to make friendship bracelets from colorful threads she'd smuggled in from the human quarters. It seemed silly, a dying alien prince learning to braid colorful strings, but Thompson had noticed how the simple, repetitive motions seemed to calm Talon's anxiety. I never understood human games before, Talon admitted, carefully moving his bishop. Dragon games are all about showing dominance or proving strength. But your games, They're about thinking, planning, working together. That's because humans learned early that we survive by helping each other, said Rodriguez from his spot by the door. The maintenance worker had become an unofficial bodyguard, making sure no dragon officials tried to interfere with the treatment. We're not the biggest or strongest species in the galaxy, so we had to get creative. The changes in Prince Talon weren't just physical. When Thompson first met him, the young dragon had barely spoken above a whisper. Now he asked constant questions about human culture, human history, human ways of looking at problems. It was like watching someone wake up from a long, dark dream. Dr. Nina appeared in the doorway, carrying her ever-present medical scanner. The dragon physician had become an enthusiastic convert to what she now called integrated care methods. Every day she documented Talon's progress, comparing his current condition to months of previous scans that showed nothing but decline. "How are we feeling today, Your Highness?" she asked, running the scanner over Talon's chest and wings. "Better," Talon said simply, but his eyes found Thompson's face. "Much better." The scanner beeped with readings that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. Talon's life force energy, the mystical dragon essence that their doctors had been trying to restore with complex treatments, was actually increasing. Not dramatically but consistently day by day. "The improvement continues," Dr. Nina announced, her scales shifting to pleased shades of green and gold. "Energy levels up another 2%, muscle tone improving, neural activity showing increased engagement." Thompson nodded, but he was more interested in other changes the scanner couldn't measure. Like how Talon had started laughing at human jokes, even when he didn't fully understand them. Or how he'd begun asking about Thompson's family back on Earth, genuinely curious about people he'd never meet. "Thompson," Talon said suddenly, abandoning the chess game. "Tell me again about your sister's graduation day." It was a story Thompson had shared several times, about how his whole family had scraped together money to attend his sister's college graduation, how they'd hooped and cheered when her name was called, how she'd cried because she was the first person in 3 generations to get a degree. "Why do you like that story so much?" Thompson asked. Talon was quiet for a moment, his claws absently tracing patterns on the sleeping platform. "Because in your story, everyone celebrates when someone succeeds. In the Dragon Court, success means someone else has to fail. If I got better, it would mean the doctors were wrong, the Emperor looked foolish for giving up, the nobles who ignored me were cruel." Thompson felt his chest tighten. "But that's changing, right? I mean, you are getting better." "Yes," Talon said softly. "But I think about what happens when I'm well enough to leave this room. Will they welcome me back, or will they resent me for proving them wrong?" Keisha looked up from her bracelet weaving. "Honey, let me tell you something my grandmother used to say, people who get mad at you for surviving weren't really on your side to begin with." Rodriguez laughed. "Your grandma sounds like she would have gotten along great with my mom. She used to say the same thing, just with a lot more colorful language." For the first time since Thompson had known him, Prince Talon truly smiled, not the polite expression of royalty, but the genuine grin of someone who finally understood they weren't alone anymore. The Imperial throne room had never seen anything like this before. Emperor Karath sat on his massive golden throne, his scales shimmering with colors that spoke of deep confusion and barely controlled anger. Around him, the dragon nobility whispered among themselves, their own scales rippling with shades of disbelief and concern. At the center of it all stood Thompson, flanked by Keisha, Rodriguez, and Dr. Nina. They had been summoned here under guard, though nobody had told them exactly what charges they were facing. Thompson's hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. After 2 months of caring for Prince Talon, after watching the young dragon transform from a dying, forgotten soul into someone vibrant and hopeful, this felt like the end of everything they'd built. The massive doors at the far end of the throne room began to open, their crystal surfaces catching the light from a dozen alien suns. Every head turned to watch as a figure walked through, tall, confident, scales gleaming with healthy silver-blue radiance. Prince Talon entered the throne room like he owned it. Thompson barely recognized him. Gone was the frail, gasping creature he'd carried to the medical wing. This was a dragon prince in the fullest sense, powerful, graceful, commanding attention just by existing. But when those familiar golden eyes found Thompson's face across the vast room, they still held the same warmth and gratitude that had grown between them over weeks of shared meals and chess games. "Father," Talon said, his voice carrying clearly through the enormous space. He walked directly to the center of the room, positioning himself between the Emperor and the group of humans. "You summoned me?" Emperor Karatha's scales shifted through a spectrum of emotions so complex that Thompson couldn't read them all. "My son," the Emperor said, and there was something broken in his voice. "You look You look like yourself again. Better than myself, Talon replied. I feel stronger than I have in years, maybe stronger than I've ever been. And I have these humans to thank for it. The whispers from the nobility grew louder, some angry, some confused. One dragon lord stepped forward, his red scales marking him as a military commander. Your Highness, surely you don't mean to credit these servants with your recovery? Our finest physicians have been treating your condition for years. Talon turned to face the Lord directly. Yes, Lord Vector. They treated my condition by telling me I was dying and there was nothing to be done. They treated my condition by avoiding me like I was cursed. They treated my condition by convincing my own family that I was beyond help. Thompson watched Emperor Karatha's face as his son spoke. The mighty ruler who commanded 12 star systems looked like he was being torn apart from the inside. These humans, Talon continued, gesturing toward Thompson and the others, they treated me like I was worth saving. When Thompson found me collapsed and dying, he didn't think about laws or protocols or what species I belonged to. He picked me up and ran for help because he couldn't stand to watch someone suffer alone. Keisha stepped forward, her voice steady despite the hundreds of powerful dragons staring at her. Your Majesty, we didn't do anything magical. We just did what any decent person does when someone needs help. We showed up, we cared, and we didn't give up. Even when everyone else had, Rodriguez added quietly. Dr. Nina moved to stand beside the humans, her medical scanner displaying holographic charts that showed Talon's remarkable recovery. Your Majesty, I have documented every aspect of the prince's treatment. The human methods succeeded where our advanced techniques failed, not because they were more sophisticated, but because they addressed needs we had overlooked. Emperor Karath rose from his throne, his massive form towering over everyone in the room. Thompson had never seen the Emperor up close before. He was even more impressive than the story suggested, scales like liquid gold, eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom and power of ages. But when he spoke, his voice was that of a father who had failed his child. You mean to tell me, the Emperor said slowly, that my son was dying not from some mystical curse, but from loneliness? That the great dragon empire, with all our knowledge and power, couldn't provide what a handful of human cleaners could? Father, Talon said gently, they didn't cure a disease. They reminded me what it felt like to be alive, to have people who believed in me, to have reasons to fight for another day. Thompson felt compelled to speak, despite every instinct telling him to stay quiet in the presence of such power. Your Majesty, Prince Talon was never weak or cursed. He just needed to know that someone cared whether he lived or died. That's not magic, that's just being human. The throne room fell completely silent. Even the whispers stopped. Then Emperor Karath did something that shocked everyone present. He stepped down from his throne, walked across the vast floor and knelt in front of Thompson. Forgive me, he said,